If you're an entrepreneur, you've taken big risks, created many jobs, and devoted yourself to your business. When it comes to building your succession and transition plan, who should be involved? What are the steps along the way? Welcome to Finish Big, the podcast with Mark Dorman, sponsored by Succession Plus, inspired by the book Finish Big, How Great Entrepreneurs Exit Their Companies on Top, by the noted entrepreneurial author Bo Burlingham. In this podcast, we share success stories along with our expertise and knowledge about what will probably be the largest financial transaction of your life. Now, on to the show.
Good day. This is Mark Dorman, your host of the Finish Big podcast. And today I am joined by a gentleman who's become a very good friend. We've played a few rounds of golf over the past half a dozen years, but I'm joined by William C. Ellis, goes by Chuck. Chuck is the recently retired president of the Pearl Valley Cheese Company. What a company it is. For nearly the last 100 years, Pearl Valley has been making an assortment of cheeses just south of Canton, Ohio, in a little town called Fresno. At one time, they were actually the largest cheese manufacturer in the state of Ohio. And we're really going to get into kind of the nuts and bolts of and the challenges of the cheese industry. Glad to have you, Chuck, on Finish Big, multi-generational business. An honor to call you a friend and do some work over the last couple of years for you and Sally and your children. But welcome to Finish Big, Chuck.
Great. Thanks. Good to see you, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, great. So let's start from the beginning. I've got a timeline here, but why don't you take me back? I remember when you and I were chatting one day, you said that there was a pretty large number of Swiss immigrants that came and settled not only in Ohio, but in Pennsylvania, maybe up in Wisconsin, that really kind of put a foothold into the cheese industry, the cheese manufacturing business. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Mark, here in eastern central Ohio, there was a lot of Swiss immigrants that started coming in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And they settled somewhere around the Sugar Creek, Ohio area, Dover and New Philadelphia area. That's where my wife's grandparents came from. They were immigrants from Switzerland, one from Spiez, her grandfather Ernest, and her grandmother from nearby town of Bergdorf. And they met here in the United States, along with many, many other Swiss immigrants, got into the farming, specifically dairy business, and then from that, the cheese industry took off here in the early 1900s.
Yeah. Just reading, doing some research, the Ernest Stadler purchased what is Pearl Valley cheese, what was Pearl Valley cheese. But what I found to be remarkable is back in 1928, they were making just a single 200-pound wheel of cheese every day. Describe to us what the operation looks like today. How many pounds of cheese are you manufacturing?
Yeah, well, today, Mark, we're making about 40,000 pounds a day. And over the years, there's been an incredible amount of technology changes that have allowed us to grow like that. Back in Ernest's day, he had a copper kettle that he had a fire underneath of that they would dump the milk into the kettle and do their thing making cheese. And they made their cheese in 200-pound wheels. And like you said, just one a day.
And back then, it was mostly Swiss cheese, I imagine?
Yeah, pretty much all Swiss cheese. And there was, Mark, I've read that there was almost 100 small little cheese houses scattered around Tuscarawas County, probably within 30 miles or so of Sugar Creek, because there were so many Swiss immigrants, family-owned cheese houses.
Yeah, so for our listening audience, the Sugar Creek, Coshocton County is south of the Pro Football Hall of Fame in the wonderful city of Canton, probably by about nearly an hour or so. The cheese industry is quite large. I mean, you shared with me, isn't Ohio one of the largest producers of particular types of cheese?
Yeah, that's right. The American consumer loves cheese. And right now, Americans are eating about 40 pounds of cheese a year. And Swiss cheese is one of the top cheeses that they consume. But yeah, Ohio, because of our roots in the Swiss culture, is the leading producer of Swiss cheese. Almost half of the Swiss cheese in the country is made in Ohio. Now, wow. Wisconsin is the overall leading cheese producer, but when it comes to Swiss cheese, Ohio leads that group by far.
I mean, and the cheese industry is huge, and obviously you're seeing a lot of moves to, prepackaged snack cheese, etc. But I mean, you've got such a wonderful business down there. So Ernest and his wife Gertrude Bandy, they started the business in the late 1920s. And then Sally's mom and dad took over in what year?
I don't know exactly, Mark, but somewhere in the late 1950s, early 1960s, Ernest and Gertrude had two boys. One boy died as a teenager, and their surviving son, John, was the one who took over. He graduated high school, did some time in the military, and then came back to the cheese business, I think in the late 1950s, early 1960s.
Yeah. But your business expanded not only in terms of volume, but in terms of type. I mean, you had a big Colby operation that was added in the 50s. I know Pearl Valley is world renowned, and I mean that. You've won world champion baby Swiss awards, correct?
Well, actually, it was Swiss. We got an award at the World Cheese Contest a few years ago for regular, we call it large eye Swiss cheese. Yeah.
Wow. Fantastic. Fantastic. So when we first met, and again, thank you for being on Finish Big, that was probably a dozen years ago. And I know you were kind of at about another 10-year runway as to when you wanted to retire. And your son, Kurt, was coming into the business, and you've got a couple of nephews as well. We really worked hard to really kind of get a sense of what your objectives were for your exit. But at the same time, there were just an immense number of challenges that I really learned to appreciate that you shared with me at that time, including things from the Environmental Protection Agency, wastewater treatment facilities, huge capital investments. Can you walk us through that? And how did that change? I mean, obviously it made your business more expensive to operate, but that had to be looking at a pretty large mountain there to have to invest $1 million in facilities that the day before you might not have needed.
Well, yeah. And there was a couple of reasons behind all those kind of changes. In Ernest's day, when he started out with one copper kettle, he grew it into multiple. I think he had 9 copper kettles. And then in the 60s, they switched to stainless steel vats that held about 2,000 gallons of milk, which was a much more sanitary, efficient way of making cheese than the way they did before. But in the 60s and into the 70s, as companies had to invest to stay in, and the smaller factories that were still using the old technologies kind of went out of business, sold, merged, to the point that today there's only about 8 operating cheese factories here in this area of Ohio. I look back on it, Mark, and we were blessed to have this business gifted over to us from Sally's mom and dad. And we kind of made it a point to, in the back of our minds, that we would also like to provide that same opportunity to the next generation of our family. I mean, we were the third generation of the family to run the business. And most people who read and study about family businesses say the third generation is the generation that either makes or breaks, and not too many go past 3. But we've made it past 3. And we have 2 sons, Thomas and Kurt, and my nephew, David, are here now, and they're going to be the 4th generation. We've been blessed to have that. You ask about some of the challenges. Well, the food industry overall has changed from small mom and pop producers and markets to big mega retailers, processors, distribution systems. And in fact, it's a global market, where there's cheese imported and exported out of this country all year round. There's just been so much growth in the industry, and that's been accompanied by regulatory pressures as well.
I mean, but there was an investment as I was doing my research. I mean, you made 2009 a significant investment in a wastewater treatment plant. Walk us through the cheese making progress. How much wastewater in this term whey, W-H-E-Y, is produced? And remember you said that they used to fertilize the fields, but now it was no longer to be the case, correct?
Yeah, Mark, go back a little bit further. Milk is 90% water. There's some protein, there's some fat, there's some other solids in there. And basically, cheese making is, in its most basic form, is taking the water out of the milk and leaving a product that tastes good, has some shelf life to it, and is versatile in its different uses. So you take out that water and you have left that which you called whey, which is correct. And for the early days of cheese making, whey was a waste item. It was either dumped, it was fed to animals. But in the late 60s and 70s, the industry started to realize, wait a minute, there's protein in this whey. And now the challenge would be, how do you work with that protein to make it a usable product? So we invested first in an ultrafiltration system to filter out those proteins from the whey, but we still had that wastewater left over, and that wastewater had to be dealt with. So in 2009, whenever the change of administration was coming in, the country was in the midst of a pretty bad recession.
Yeah, that's a financial crisis right there. Yeah.
Yeah. The Obama administration came into office and said, we're ready to invest in shovel-ready infrastructure projects. And we had already been started talking with our local county commissioners about a project that would help the small village of Fresno with a wastewater problem they had with their sanitary sewage and the problem we had. So we were able to get some assistance to create pumping stations and water lines to take pre-treated wastewater out to a sanitary sewage system. But it was a significant investment, well over $1 million just to treat waste.
Hi, this is Mark Dorman. Sorry for the interruption. I know you're listening to the Finish Big podcast, and I'm excited to have you here. If in the event you have any questions, please head over to www.succession.plus/US, where you can find out how to reach me. I'd love to hear from you. And now back to the show. Let's talk about the business today. So how many employees does Pearl Valley Cheese have currently? I know you've got just a tremendous workforce down there. We've been there on campus, so to speak. You've got a little retail store, which does a very good trade down there. It's a bit of a tourist attraction as well. Walk us through kind of the facility and its footprint today. I know it's just kind of grown over time, correct?
Oh, yeah. We had a big expansion in 2000. We doubled our footprint and doubled our production capacity in 2002. And just as I thought we were maxed out, my boys and my nephew showed me that they could figure out a way to do more than what I thought we could do. So, yeah, we're up to around 11 million pounds of cheese a year right now. And when I came here in the 80s, we were making about 3 million pounds a year. So we ratcheted it up considerably, up to 11 million pounds. We went from 10 employees in 1990 up to about 60 employees today. I mean, I took it as far as I could go, but the boys have just been able to leverage that and go much further than I ever thought we could do.
Yeah, I mean, both in the production capacity and the production of the cheese, but also in the marketing and new customers and new distribution channels, et cetera. So how has the internet changed your business? I know your son Kurt is a real talent. He's been involved in that and got his tentacles out into the marketplace, got some new customers. I mean, to go from 3 million to 11 million pounds a year, that's an unimaginable number.
Well, we're still primarily a wholesale company, Mark. We market the product out there in our brand name, Pearl Valley Cheese, but we have several customers that we do private label work for. And I mean, and some people who are unaccustomed to the food industry would say maybe that's deceptive, but it's really not. Those companies are very good in marketing and distribution, and we're pretty good at making cheese. So why we take what we're good at, what they're good at, and it works for both of us. So private label is something that Kurt has done a pretty good job of finding those companies that need their own label on a product, take it and run with it into new markets and retailers that we probably would have ever been able to approach just with the Pearl Valley label. So yeah. Kurt's been able to do well in that. You mentioned the internet. We have always tried to do like gift boxes, but now we've got a year-round presence on the internet that people can order our cheese year-round. We ship it in not refrigerated, but coolers so that we avoid any problems with temperature. We do a fundraiser program for nonprofit organizations and plus the retail store. So yeah, we've been able to expand that market into a few other areas too.
And if you even wanted to buy a Pearl Valley baseball cap, I was on your website. You could order one of those too. Again, you got an apparel page. But I remember you telling me years ago that it's just I know you've become a friend, but cheese making industry is really a labor of love. I mean, milk is made every day by the cows naturally. That milk needs to be harvested, taken to Pearl Valley Cheese to be turned into cheese. I mean, what is the cycle? Are you open 364 days a year? Do you ever get a day off?
Well, when I came here, we were making cheese 6 days a week and the store was open 7 days. We didn't like that lifestyle too much. And as we expanded the capacity in 2000, we were able to compress our work week down to 5 days a week. But like you said, the cows make milk 7 days a week. So that involved additional investment in milk storage, sped up the process of filling those vats so we could keep up with what we were getting. But yeah, and you've teased me over the years that maybe I wasn't making enough money. Well,
I didn't tease you. I said, it wasn't a teasing you. I said, you work too hard.
Well, it is a long day. I mean, my guys, the first guy starts at 4 a.m. and the rest of us show up between 5 and 6, and they're out of here sometime in the middle or late afternoon. It is a long day. There's a lot to it. And I mean, automation, technology, growth has been phenomenal. I couldn't do it by myself. The younger guys with their insights and skills make this kind of growth possible. And in fact, we're considering another expansion project now, trying to figure out which steps first. I mean, we've got a few steps to consider with equipment and systems and building and storage as well.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I wanted to change channels here real quick. So there's also kind of the economics of the cheese business, and you've really educated me on this, but there's almost some impact at the futures, the Chicago Board of Exchange, et cetera, on the price per milk and how that affects. Can you share with our listeners how that works and how that factors into really the price of cheese vis-a-vis how the milk markets are going?
Yeah, to make cheese, it's all about your price of milk. For every dollar that comes in here for cheese sales, about 60 to 70 cents goes out for milk cost. The milk price is established by the USDA's Market Administration Office. It's a very complex system of surveying the industry, but it comes down to the fact they establish a monthly milk price that is then published, and cheese factories are not forced to do it by regulation, but the market forces require us to follow that milk price that's established by the market administrator's office. So it's set. And then we have to sell our cheese based on either the cost of milk. If we're making some of our cheeses are priced on the cost of milk, and others are priced on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange commodity market for cheddar cheese blocks. The USDA's Market Administration's Office publishes a milk price at the beginning of the month for the previous month. So we have that as our main cost. Then the pricing for most of our wholesale accounts is based on prices at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange for cheddar cheese blocks. We take weekly averages and we adjust our wholesale prices pretty much on a weekly basis based on that. A lot of it's out of our control. We have to adjust our overages and transportation. But yeah, it's an industry that's pretty well regulated. And I just don't think that we have some of the margins that some other people in the food industry have.
No, because I mean, your cost of goods, like you said, are a minimum of 60% just for your raw materials, your milk plus labor. And so that means that at the end of the day, on 11 million pounds of cheese, you're operating on some pretty tight margins, and some of the variables are a little bit out of your control. So, not only are you facing the regulatory channels or challenges, but you've got this floating cost of goods that's out there. And that's one of the things I've always admired about you. And you've really taught me to respect and understand the cheese business. But for the last, it'll be your 100-year anniversary in 2028 for Pearl Valley Cheese. I'm sure you guys are looking forward to that. That'll be here before you know it in only 3 years. What are your plans for your 100-year anniversary?
Well, Lord willing, I'll still be around. I don't know.
Yeah, me too.
Unless I get caught up in a big storm on Lake Erie someday. Hopefully I'm still around. I don't know, Mark. We haven't made a whole lot of definite plans, but we have to make some plans. I guess it's not that far down the road.
No, that's a huge, obviously, 100 years, the centennial anniversary. So Chuck, now you've kind of stepped back, let Kirk Thomas and David run the show. Jenna's in there as well. Sally's got the grandchildren. So you're kind of finishing big, so to speak. You bought yourself a boat. You like to do some walleye fishing on Lake Erie. What else do you do for fun?
Well, golfing when I can, playing with the grandkids. We do a little bit of hobby farming. We're raising some beef cows and a few chickens and hogs up on the family farm as more of a hobby than a real big moneymaker at this time. Sally and I are going to take some traveling time off this summer, but right now I'm still working part-time. I'm cutting back, allowing the boys to kind of drive the ship and be around to help them when and wherever I can.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Our guest today has been Chuck Ellis, recently stepping down as the CEO and president of the Pearl Valley Cheese Company in Fresno, Ohio. Chuck, I believe the listening audience can check out your website at pearlvalleycheese.com. If you're interested in really a great day trip, if you're in East Central Ohio, really Coshocton County, Pearl Valley is one of many cheese houses, Sugar Creek, etc. Make your way down to Pearl Valley, stop in their little retail store there. You can see really cheese-making state-of-the-art facilities. But remember, it just goes back to a 200-pound single wheel. That's the origin, and they're coming up on their 100-year anniversary in 3 short years. Chuck, I want to thank you for being on Finish Big, the podcast today, and all the best to Sally and the boys. Hey,
thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing you. Hopefully we can get our golf date in this summer.
I would love that. This has been Mark Dorman for the Finish Big podcast. Until we meet again, ladies and gentlemen, here's to finishing big. Have a great day.
Hope you enjoyed listening to Finish Big, the podcast with Mark Dorman, sponsored by Succession Plus. Don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit our website at www.succession.plus/US or give us a call at 330-350-5410. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Succession Plus. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional tax or legal advice. Always seek the advice of your legal or tax professionals with any questions you may have regarding your specific situation.